Welcome to the Mind Design Sports Podcast. I'm Brandon, and in each episode, I'll be talking about sports psychology with the guest speaker. If you want to design your sports experience, you've come to the right place. If you want more tips and insights on how to improve your sports performance mentally, check out our website and other podcasts at mind-designsports.org. What are some myths or misconceptions about confidence or motivation do you have for both, perhaps?
Well, I suppose if we take a look at confidence, and kind of I suppose touched on it earlier, and it was this idea that okay, we need to be confident to perform well. You it's not exactly true, and like I said, if you take some time out and say to yourself, is there times that I've performed well, when I didn't feel confident? There most certainly will be. I suppose it's up to yourself to maybe look at those performances and say, what other aspects about that performance helped me in that case when maybe I wasn't feeling so confident, and trying to cultivate them as well. And so I think that there's something that it's kind of this idea that we need to feel confident all the time in order to perform. Well, sometimes we don't. Even times where underdogs, the most simple example, when underdogs win, maybe don't feel confident, but somehow they just win. They're not sure, the reasons vary for different people, but that's one of the myths, I suppose. And then if we're looking at motivation, it's this idea that we need to be motivated to do stuff, and you know that kind of, we can try and like I say, we're talking about getting our needs and things, and getting the basics right. We can try and cultivate motivation, but it's important to be aware that motivation is a feeling. So I'm feeling motivated. Sometimes I will feel motivated, other times I won't. It comes and goes. Um, you're not always, just because you decide to do something one day doesn't mean that you're going to be motivated to do it the next day, the day after. What we really want then is commitment. We're kind of looking towards the idea of commitment, and motivation and commitment are two different things, closely linked, but quite different as well. Commitment is saying that, look, I'm going to do this no matter what, whether I feel motivated or not. But on those days that we feel motivated, it's a lot easier to do it. But on the days when we're not motivated, it's a bit more difficult to do it. And it's just being aware, and having something that you want to be committed to, and knowing what that is. That's different for different people.
Yeah. For confidence, making mistakes is one thing that kind of takes a big toll for athletes and their confidence sometimes. Like, they don't want to make mistakes in front of their coach, or they might get benched. How can an athlete overcome this fear of failure, of mistakes?
Um, yeah, and fear of failure is a big thing. And there's a guy, Trevor Moawad. He works as mental skills coach, and he works with NFL teams and things like that there. And he had he spoke about Russell Wilson throwing the pick against New England, when New England won the Super Bowl. I think it was maybe 2015 or 14. I'm not sure. And he was talking about speaking to Russell Wilson and all this here. They talked about fear of failure, and Russell Wilson said, or I'm not sure which one of them said it, but they were talking about you know you can never succeed if you're afraid to hit the same shot that could lose the game, but it could also win you the game. So we are talking about Russell Wilson, and he threw that pick, and yes, it more or less lost in the game, but on the flip, it could have won them the game. 70% of the time, that throw probably wins them the game. And I think that's the big thing, that we're talking about fear of failure, and sort of understand that you know if we want to win, we have to do something that might result in failure. We can just sit in the same spot and never move. Movement, being different, going against the grain, putting yourself out there, it's a scary thing. But if we ever want to, get better, if we ever want to improve, if we ever really want to succeed, we have to be willing to, take that shot that could lose us a game, but it could win us a game. And even in losing, we can always learn something from it, and that's the big thing as well. If you're able to learn from your failures, you're not as afraid to fail. I think that's the big thing as well. Is if we're losing and we're not taking anything from it, then we become afraid of failure. But if we fail and then we are able to say, well, I can learn this from that, I can learn this from that, I can apply that, then we sort of take away that power that the fear of failure has over us. That oh, this is automatically going to be a poor thing. Well, no, it's not actually. I can learn so many different things about this situation or this event.
I see. Continuing on the theme of reflection, how does an athlete's self-criticism affect his or her performance, and how can an athlete turn self-criticism from anxiety to motivation or even confidence?
I suppose again nearly follows on from that idea of the fear of failure, and if we do fail, when we're criticizing ourselves, that self-criticism or criticism of ourselves, we want to what we're saying to ourselves and actually break it down. And again, this takes time. This isn't going to be something that you're going to be able to just do off the spot. And you'll probably have to write it down. Maybe take the end of the day and write down these little criticisms that you say to yourself, and flip them. But the self-criticism and say to yourself, is this actually valid? Is there any truth to this? Am I actually being realistic with myself here? Try and use it that way. Make it constructive. Is there anything I can take from this that I can improve upon? Can I take actionable steps from this criticism that I'm giving myself? And within that, when you start doing that there, you'll quickly start to realize that a lot of the criticism that we inflict upon ourselves is actually rubbish. None of it is actually beneficial to ourselves, and it goes back to that idea of as humans, we are inherently negative individuals, and when we're able to break down this criticism or flip it in a way that we're able to say that's actually not true, or okay, part of that was true. If we look at it factually, part of that was true. How can I improve that? Let's take these steps. Then the next step is I am improving this. You can see how it moves from giving the anxiety to motivation, that look, I'm actually taking this and using it to improve myself. That's stuff I used to say to myself and repeatedly say it to myself without ever actually acting upon it or utilizing it. I'm now utilizing that stuff for my own benefit, and that's helping me now. But like I say, it's one of those things, it takes time, like all mental skills, and being self-aware of yourself, and the things that you say, the things that you do, and whether they're helping you or whether they're not helping you. But yeah, that's probably, I suppose, how I would do it.
Okay, cool. So I was scrolling through your Instagram, and which looks great, and I saw some posts, and I'm just going to ask you some questions about that and some general sports psych questions. So you showcase a lot of athletes in your posts. Can you talk about a specific one and maybe how they use sports psychology or something that you like from them that maybe young athletes can take away too?
I suppose probably very early on, it's one of the first posts that I put up on the page, and it was an interview Tom Brady done on the Harry Stern show. I think it was. I think it was not long. It was not long after he moved to Tampa Bay, so it's kind of relevant too, I suppose, with what he's kind of done this year and quite recently. And he was talking about the Super Bowl, where obviously Patriots beat Atlanta after being 28-3 down. There's a bit in it, and when you're talking about things that young athletes can take away of themselves and use, like this is the kind of stuff that you can take away and use yourself straight away. They're talking about how they're 28-3 down, and he says I'll actually just get it up on my phone and see what the actual quote was, because it's not that far down. So he says you could look at a situation being 28-3 down and basically quit and say we've no shot of winning, or you can say this is going to be an amazing comeback when we come back from this. This is going to be a defining moment of a professional career. And I think when you shift your mind to think that way, it becomes very empowering as opposed to very discouraging. And this is just a real simple way of reframing situations. reframing is something that's really simple that all athletes can do, and like Tom Brady done there, down by so many points, they could have just sort of said, "Ah, we're just going to get beat here, and we're just going to be whatever it might be," but he sort of turned it around and said, viewed it as a challenge, and said, "Oh, like when we come back from this, or if we can come back from this, this will be one of the greatest sporting moments of all time." You can apply that to all different situations within sport. Rather than looking at the total, all the negatives on show, let's take a look at some of the facts of the situation. Try and use them in an optimistic manner. That's something that I try to put forward, as this idea of being optimistic, and what are the facts of the situation, how can I use them in an optimistic manner. And that doesn't mean just being like overly positive, saying like, "Oh yes, we're going to win." That's not always an option, but it's taking the facts of the situation, like Tom Brady there. There's still time on the clock. They still have like a quarter to go, so there's still the opportunity for them to get the scores that they needed to eventually go on and win the game. So that's just like a real simple one. It's just reframing a situation to take the facts of the situation that you have and start using them in an optimistic manner, to help yourself.
I like that one. Okay, cool. I think another Instagram post you had was about monitor acceptance theory. That sounds pretty interesting. So, what is that, and can you talk about it?
So monitor acceptance theory is sort of a concept, an idea within mindfulness, and it sort of suggests that effective mindfulness is based on allowing the mind to think freely without needing to take action, almost as such. And it's broke up into two. So we talk about monitoring. So that's having that self-awareness, being aware of how we feel, our mood, our emotions, how we feel, maybe even physically. Are we feeling fatigued? Is there any part of our bodies feeling sore? Things like that there. And this is something that, especially in the current I suppose time, we're not really aware of how we feel. We tend to be on autopilot a lot, where we'll sit and we'll flick through our phones, watch TV. When we're talking to people, sometimes we're not really be listening to what we're saying. So that's kind of what the monitoring refers to, is being aware of how we actually feel. And then acceptance is just really simple, and it's just this idea of feeling at ease, and instead of, I suppose, maybe to trying to change thoughts, or remove thoughts. It's just kind of allowing them to be there, and when we allow them to be there, we accept them for what they are. You find a lot more naturally that they tend to cause you a lot less stress, and that kind of is what it comes down to, is monitoring, accepting, and then it's almost relieving that stress and tension when we're able to be aware of the stresses that we might have.
Absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people have watched The Last Dance, and before we talked about in the part one of this podcast, you talked about that Last Dance was one of your favorite films. Is there any sports psychology tidbits of the film or documentary that you took away, or just any general valuable lessons?
Yeah, there's probably there's the whole thing probably could be classed as a sports psychology, documentary. What could be seen as positive, helpful aspects of it, maybe what could be seen as unhelpful aspects of it. Nearly, you talk about Jordan. I said earlier about maybe some athletes having this obsession with sport. Jordan probably had that there, and it worked out great. Because he became the greatest basketball player of all time. But in a lot of respects, that probably wasn't a healthy attitude to have. Even his treatment almost of other teammates and stuff, probably wasn't very good. And those are supposed sort of some of the unhelpful ones. But one of the things that I took a lot from it was, I suppose, this idea of trust. And you think through like successful organizations that there's this idea of trust, and trust is how great teams win. But when we actually watch the documentary, you sort of get the idea that there actually isn't a lot of trust going on within the organization. The players aren't really fond of they don't really like the front office, Jerry Krause or whatever. Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson have quite a strange relationship. even, you know, early on, I suppose, in it, Jordan didn't trust a lot of his teammates. You know, he always had to be hitting the last shot. You know, and that, you know, obviously that trust kind of grows throughout the championships of the team. You know, you see later on down the line, Jordan gives the ball up to Steve Kerr to hit a shot to win a game, I think. But I suppose it's this idea of, you know, trust, and trust can be perceived is in different ways. You know, the players all trusted Jordan, but it wasn't through, you know, the usual ways that players acquire trust. You know, with those, you know, helpful relationships, you know, supportive relationships you would talk about. Um, it was more so because of his honesty. You know, he might be probably pretty mean to them, but I suppose they were able to see that, look, this is him just being honest with us. And, you know, it's probably just like straight up criticism. But, you know, how can we take that? And I suppose it's up to them, I suppose, to use it in a positive way. And even Rodman, when you're talking about trust and things like that there, the players, you know, trusted him to, you know, perform well on the court, but off the court, they had absolutely no idea what he was going to do. You know, he could say that he was going to do something, and he would do the complete opposite thing. You know, appearing in WCW and things like that. There, so I sort of call it dysfunctional trust in those aspects, but I'm not sure. That's kind of just what I call it. I'm not sure what, if there's maybe actual, you know, correct terms for that kind of the area, but no, that was kind of the big thing I took away. It was all like these different what you thought would have been, you know, an organization with a lot of trust between all the different areas. There really wasn't, and you know how they kind of were successful in spite of that.
So you're from Ireland, and I'm sure it's a little different in Ireland for athletes there compared to the US. So do you see any differences in maybe sports psychology or even like the mental aspect of sports in Ireland versus the US?
Well, I suppose first off, the US would probably be a lot more ahead um, in terms of its, you know, sports psychology, mental skills arena compared to Ireland. Ireland is supposed still, you know, a wee bit behind in that regard, but you know it's making great progress, and you know there's some great leaders in the field here as well. And I suppose that's nearly where the big difficulty for athletes comes in then, because you know sports psychology is, you know, one of these things that's been um, championed a lot in America. So you know athletes maybe feel a bit more comfortable, you know, reaching out to someone. They maybe know of more people that they can reach out to you know, seek the services, so to speak. Whereas I think in Ireland, you know, that's something that's not really as readily available. People aren't sure where to go, they who to speak to, and as well because it's, you know, a bit further behind in America, or you know it's maybe a newer area. There's still that idea around it of, you know, I'm not sure of what it is, that area of unknown, or you know, a lack of knowledge, you know, by people who maybe aren't in the field as such. And you know I think that there's the big difference really for, you know, athletes in, you know, America and Ireland is, you know, they're maybe not aware of, you know, sports psychology, the benefits it can give them, and then even, you know, who to reach out to and where to go to.
Great. What are some of your favorite sports psychology quotes or mottos?
I probably there's really good one. Angelo Dundee, quite like it. He was a Muhammad Ali's trainer for most of his career, maybe probably all of his career, I think. And you know, he was talking to a reporter or something, and the reporter said, you know, all these you work with all these boxers is not quite scary or something. I can't remember what the exact introduction to it was, but what Andrew Dundee said was, you know, I don't work with boxers. I work with men who happen to box. I know. I think it was a great, you know, differentiation. You know, or you know, separation of, yes, these are people who box, but they're not boxers. You know, they're men, they're human beings, and they should be treated as such. They should be, they still have to have those relationships, those other areas of their lives. They have all these other qualities rather than just these qualities that are associated to boxing as such. And I thought that was like a really great quote, and sort of in essence what coaching really should be about. And that is looking at the human first, and then looking at the athlete, or what it is, or what it is they do, and how we can improve that. And then I suppose another one that I've seen quite recently, from Michael Gervais, big guy over there in North America, and it was a quote, and he said, "When you compete, imagine yourself with an empty glass that you're trying to fill up, instead of a full glass that you're trying to avoid from spilling." And I seen it and I read it somewhere, and I was like, that's actually such a great description. And it's that idea of playing with no fear. So play like you have the opportunity to gain something, rather than you're trying to avoid the opportunity to lose something. And it's a bit of a strange analogy, but I really liked it. And sort of see people, you can imagine people running around with glasses of water and empty glasses and stuff. And but sort of showcases that difference between athletes who play to win and athletes who play to avoid losing.
Yeah, I like that too. My last kind of focus of questions would be, what would you kind of say to maybe a young athlete in middle school that wants to try out a new sport and really get into it? Maybe on the mental side of things, like what should they prepare themselves for, or what should they kind of, maybe they should develop like a specific sports psych technique, maybe like breathing or positive self-talk. Like which one would be most important when starting out?
I suppose in terms of starting out, a new sport, a lot of stuff that we do in sports psychology, it almost, sounds like common sense, or mental skills, or whatever you want to call it. If we're going into a new sport, one of the best things that we want to do is know about the sport, know the key skills, the main tactics, all of that there kind of stuff. Because if we, again, it comes back to that sort of idea that I talked about, that we can gain confidence from all these different things, but we're maybe not actually saying that we're gaining. Confidence comes as a byproduct. And if we're starting a new sport, we want to know what it is, what our role would be within that sport. What I would need to be focusing on. What area of the game am I going to be able to, and having a clear vision of what my job is if I do go to play this sport or whatever it may be. And from within that, when I know those things, I can take confidence from that. And I suppose, yes, we want to be learning like breathing techniques and things like that there, or for trying out for a new sport. That would be the best thing. I would say, like, know what your role is going to be, how you can impact the game in a positive way. And obviously breathing techniques are great. Box breathing, breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out through your mouth for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat that round, 4 4 4 4 box breathing. That can be really helpful too if we find ourselves maybe feeling a wee bit overwhelmed and things. But I suppose it goes back to getting the basics right, and almost like common sense. Just let's know what we're doing, and how we can do it.
Of course. And my last question would kind of be like, I saw on your Instagram that you talked about transformational leadership. What is that? And how can an athlete use that, I guess?
Yeah, so transformational leadership, it's something that and again, much like a lot of the stuff in that we do, and sports psych work and mental skills work, this can be applied across to whatever arena it is that that you are performing in, so to speak. And it's just this idea that coaches can have a real positive impact. And almost in an opposite kind of way, these kind of coaches, they don't put the outcome as a priority. So what they want to do is help athletes grow, and reach, whatever their full potential might be, or, get as close to it as possible. So, but in doing that, they're putting, the players in the right position to, achieve the best possible result, the extraordinary result. And another one of the big things about it is it's, holistic in manner. Transformational leaders want to improve their players as their athletes, for example, as human beings. And a big example of this is Greg Popovich at the San Antonio Spurs. And if you ever look up some of the stuff about him, like he'll have different types of magazines and the changing rooms or whatever. He'll maybe get the players to go and research a topic about global affairs or something. Trying to stimulate conversations within players related to outside basketball, and improve them essentially as human beings. So, and again, it goes back to that idea of almost balance that I talked about at the very start. Yes, it's great to have this focus on sports, but we want to cultivate other areas of our lives, because we can't play a sport forever. We have to have these other areas of our lives that we can fall back into as well. And that's one of the key factors of transformational leadership.
I understand. Well, Eddy, those are all my questions. Do you want to add anything else for the audience, or something like a tip or insight that you want to share?
I suppose if we're just going to like leave off on somebody or leave off on something, it would probably just be this idea of self-awareness, and let's try and build that. How can we build that? We build that through reflection. After every game, taking a look at the game and saying, what things did I do well, so well, what can I improve, and building that self-awareness. Because if we don't do these sort of tasks around self-awareness, so like almost like journaling as such, we don't know where we're at. We don't know if we can improve. We don't know if we're getting worse. We don't know if we're getting better. We have to be able to see if what we're doing is working, so to speak. And this sort of reflection that we do, this is a continuing process. So we want to be doing this all the time. Not all the time, obviously, but once a week, or after each training session that we have, we want to be looking and saying, taking on the positive things, so we know where we're at on that level, and then things that we can improve, so we can take steps towards improving them, and we can focus on them during the next training session. So that'd probably be the final point I would say is just always asking yourself, how can I improve, areas that I can improve, on continuous reflection, when we apply that reflection, means continuous improvement, and that's what we always want to be doing.
Yeah, that's definitely valuable. Well, Eddy, thanks for hopping on the podcast and sharing all your insights on what you want about sports psychology, confidence, and motivation. I think it was really good. I had a good time talking to you.
Not a problem, Brant. Thank you very much for having me on. And like I said at the start, hopefully people get a bit of value from it. And even as I said somewhere during it there, if you take one thing from this and you decide that I kind of like that idea, go out, look, do a bit of research on Google. There's tons of books out there. There's a wealth of knowledge out there, folks. So be afraid to just type it into Google and see where you go, and find different ways of applying maybe different wee ideas and things like that. There, it's the same as your nutrition or anything like that. There, your gym work. There's a wealth of that knowledge online. There's a wealth of mental skills knowledge and sports psychology knowledge online as well. Don't be afraid to go for it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Well, thank you, Eddy, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening to the My Design Sports podcast. Before you leave, please show some love for the podcast by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Stay tuned for next month's podcast with a new guest speaker.